Welcome to Who Killed Haing Ngor. In the last episode, I introduced you to the murder of Henry Liu. Liu was a Taiwanese-American writer and political dissident assassinated in California in 1984. The men who carried that out were members of a Taiwanese triad called the Bamboo Union. The question I'm exploring is that if Ngor was killed in Los Angeles because of business disputes he was having in Cambodia, then did he get mixed up with organized crime? Because it would take an organized criminal group with international reach to carry out a killing in Los Angeles. That's what makes me interested in the Henry Liu case. It establishes that a Taiwanese triad called the Bamboo Union had the capability to carry out the assassination of an American citizen on U.S. soil. On top of that, the Liu assassination was circumstantially similar to the murder of Ngor, just as the group was becoming super active in Cambodia. All of that is what brought me to Taiwan. My name is Patricia Nunan, and this is Who Killed Haing Ngor. It's pouring down rain in Taipei, the capital of Taiwan. I've shown up in the height of rainy season. I'm in a car with Jonah Q. He's the Taiwanese journalist I've hired as my producer.
Yeah, so how likely do you think Bamboo Union actually conducted the crime?
So I don't think it was an official assassination by the Bamboo Union because it wasn't political. It was probably a revenge killing. But I think we have a suspect in mind, and I think he was friends with organized crime figures, possibly Bamboo Union, and he might have either asked for a favor or asked for advice on how I go about doing this. And
quite similar to the Henry Liu cases?
It's similar to the Henry Liu case. It's my first day at work in Taipei, and I've got my biggest interview. I'm talking to Chang An-lo. He's better known as White Wolf. He was a founding member of the Bamboo Union, and as he'll tell us, he's blood brothers with Henry Liu. He was one of the trio of assassins who killed Henry Liu. His nickname is King Duck, or Dry Duck. Henry Liu, you should know, is dead. He died of cancer in 2007. Talking to White Wolf may be the next best thing. Just a quick note, I'm going to refer to Chang An-lo by his nickname White Wolf because I think it'll be easier for listeners. What brought me out to Taipei are the broad similarities between the Henry Liu killing and the murder of Haing Ngor. Both prominent Asian Americans were killed at their homes in California. In Liu's case, he was shot to death in his garage. In Ngor's, he was shot to death in his carport. In each case, neighbors noticed the area being staked out ahead of the killings by Asian individuals. I'm hoping that by diving into the Henry Liu story, I'll find a new thread in my Ngor investigation. So I guess my first question would be, how would you characterize the Bamboo Union as an organization?
Originally, Bamboo is like, youngsters gang. And all the members are students, high school students, originally.
This is White Wolf. He's 77 years old. He went to college in Nevada and graduate school at Stanford, outside San Francisco. But that was in the early 1980s, so his English is a little rusty.
Gradually, when a young student become adults. Okay. So something like a mafia, something like, yeah.
Something like a mafia.
Yeah.
Does that make you the head? Some quick history. After World War II, civil war broke out in China, pitting communist forces led by Mao Zedong against the nationalists. They were led by Chiang Kai-shek. Obviously, the communists won. Many nationalists fled to Taiwan, an island off China's southeastern coast. Here in Taipei, the nationalists formed a new party and a new government. They are the Kuomintang, or the KMT. So in the 1950s in Taiwan, there were a lot of new arrivals from the Chinese mainland, uprooted families with kids. Those kids banded together for protection. Among them were founding Bamboo Union members White Wolf and Chen-Chi Li. Does that make you the head? Jonah is going to translate for us.
基本上我已经不过问这个
Basically, I left Bamboo Union since 1979 when I went to America.
自从我
Only until the Henry Liu case happened, so I was forced to be engaged in the BU affairs because of tape.
基本上呢，我就算脱离了。
The tape recording, that's significant. We're going to come back to that. One key thing I learned about my interviews and conversations is there's a real generational split within the Bamboo Union. You might call Chen-Chi Li and White Wolf the Bamboo Union OGs, the original gangsters. Another Bamboo Union OG I spoke to was Lu Mao-chun. He's also somewhere in his 70s. He was not directly involved in the Henry Liu case. But like White Wolf, he speaks about the triad's early days with a certain amount of nostalgia. He even wrote a memoir about it. Once again, you'll hear Jonah translating.
Yeah.
So if you write a memoir about gang activities, aren't you going to run into trouble with the law?
那前辈，您这个写这本书啊，
不会，
这么多，
为什么？这都是一个过去的事情。
So, maybe you don't believe me, but I actually don't have any criminal record. Even I maybe we kill someone, we fought a lot, but after all, we we compromise and we had to deal with all the people we fought before in the police station. So all these things, I don't think the government will come to me and give me troubles because these are all the things that back in the old time.
Jonah told me later that those compromises were probably cash payouts to the families of people killed by the triad. That's how they used to roll. Back to Henry Liu. This is a complicated story, so I'm giving you a simplified version. You don't need to know all of this for the Haing Ngor investigation, but I dove into it so I could sneak in sideways to talk about Ngor with Bamboo Union members. After all, the Bamboo Union carried out one successful killing on U.S. soil. Maybe they'd want to do it again. Maybe not for the KMT, but for money? First, I want to credit Fires of the Dragon by David Kaplan, a book that comprehensively covers the Liu assassination. These details are corroborated by news reports and U.S. Department of Justice and congressional reports. Still, Kaplan's book is one of my main sources. It's 1984. The KMT are in power in Taiwan, and their government is so authoritarian that its tenure is now referred to as the White Terror. Journalist Henry Liu had consistently criticized top KMT officials to the point that his life was in danger, so he left Taiwan and moved to the United States. Living in Daly City outside San Francisco, Liu kept publishing anti-KMT stories in the Chinese language press. He also had a book coming out that was highly critical of Taiwan's president. So the KMT decided to assassinate him. Taiwan's military intelligence didn't want to do the hit themselves, so they reached out to Bamboo Union leader Chen-Chi Li. The military intelligence chief told Chen-Chi Li that Henry Liu was a communist, a traitor, clearly an enemy of Taiwan, so he had to be taken out. Chen-Chi Li accepted the mission. Off he went to California. There, he stayed with White Wolf, then a grad student at Stanford.
I don't know how to translate to English. 一日香火情，终身兄弟；一日香火缘，终身兄弟情。
But one day we burn the thing together, we are forever the brothers. That's how I feel about Chen-Chi Li.
因为缘，英文没有这个字，缘分。
Because in English context, we don't have such a concept called 缘分, which it means like the invisible bond between people. So
they were sworn brothers, White Wolf says.
Because we have 缘分, the one day's 缘分. The 缘分 is the we become sworn brother.
Mm-hmm. Two other Bamboo Union members soon joined Chenchi Li in California. One of them is Wu Dun. He's described as the Bamboo Union's chief executioner. It's October 15, 1984. While Chenchi Li stayed at a prearranged location, Wu Dun and the third accomplice went to Liu's house. They waited in his garage. When Liu eventually came out, they shot him 3 times, killing him. It looks like Ngor's movements were also being followed. Neighbors told police that in the weeks before the murder, they noticed a strange white car in the alley behind his apartment building, near the carport where he was later killed. Then there was an Asian man who came to Ngor's apartment building in the hours after the murder, knocking on doors and claiming he was looking for his mother. Has he ever come across a situation like that where someone involved in the crime tries to come back covertly to see the aftermath of the crime? I put that question to Kai Ren Ho. He's a retired police officer in Taipei whose focus was organized crime. Once again, you'll hear Jonah's translation.
只要现场发生
80% of the cases I've done before, most of 80% of these murderers will come back to the scene because they want to know like, what's the next step of the police would take. And before, in the back of all time, we don't film the scene. We don't use a camera to film what's happening in the scene. But now we do because these kind of actions.
I want to point out that the white car, the door-knocking man, these are details I get from the LAPD's own records. But absolutely none of that makes Ngor's murder a plot by the Bamboo Union or any other triad. Any number of killers might stake out a target's residence. Any number of killers might return to the scene of the crime. Still, those details make it much less likely to me that Ngor was killed by teenage gangbangers, high on crack and looking to steal a chain. As listeners know, that's the narrative that LA police and prosecutors used to convict 3 young men, sending them to jail for decades. One of them is Innocence Center client Jason Chan. The assassination of Henry Liu made headlines around the world. That's when Chenchi Li and his accomplices figured it out. They'd been betrayed. Liu was a journalist, a writer, not a communist. These were obviously the days when journalists were far more respected than we are now. But the 3 assassins realized that the KMT had set them up to be the fall guys for a killing they never would have agreed to if they'd known Liu was a journalist. Now we're back at the tape recording, the one that White Wolf mentioned. In their panic after the murder, Chenchi Li recorded a tape outlining all the details of the assassination plot. He named names in Taiwan's military intelligence who were involved, and he left that tape with White Wolf. So when he made the recording, it was an insurance policy, so he could prove that the KMT was involved.
所以说这个录音带是您当初做来当做一个就是保险，
不是我做，他陈其礼做的
啊，陈其礼的一个保险，就是避免被政府
Okay.
就怕被灭口。
in case of getting killed.
Right.
Yeah.
The trio of assassins fled back to Taiwan. Soon, Chenchi Li and accomplice Wu Dun were arrested. Now there was that third accomplice. He's not relevant to the Ngor investigation, and he ends up dead very quickly for other reasons. This is already complicated enough, so I'm leaving him out. Back in the U.S., White Wolf heard about the Chenchi Li and Wu Dun arrests, so he gave that tape to the FBI. The FBI made the tape public. Boom! That's what makes an international incident. Taiwan had carried out an assassination of an American citizen on U.S. soil. This was a massive diplomatic scandal. In the U.S., the FBI and the Department of Justice were rocked by questions from Congress. Exactly how serious was the Asian organized crime threat in the United States? Miraculously, White Wolf says He didn't know anything about the assassination plot ahead of time, even though Chen Qili was staying with him. The FBI and the DOJ don't buy it. The Bamboo Union is an Asian organized crime syndicate, the FBI charged, and White Wolf, one of its top leaders. They launched an undercover operation and determined that White Wolf was a drug trafficker. He was arrested and charged for an alleged plot to import billions of dollars of heroin from Southeast Asia to the States. He was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in a federal prison. He served 10. One former FBI official told me that the Bamboo Union essentially owned Chinatown in San Francisco throughout the 1960s and 70s. In the 1990s, when Ngor died, the DOJ said there were around 10,000 Asian organized crime members in the U.S. from various groups. A few dozen were estimated to work within Bamboo Union cells, scattered across the country. To this day, White Wolf denies any wrongdoing.
Yellow news. You know what it means, yellow news?
It's fake news, yeah.
Yeah, exaggeration, you know, because 美国的黄色新闻，什么事情给它渲染。没有。
It's just fake news spreading around and around, and it's just getting more ridiculous over time.
Here's what I was having trouble understanding. Why on earth were these people talking to me? I'm a random American journalist with a podcast they never heard of. These are the founding fathers of the Bamboo Union, the OGs. They killed somebody whom they admit they were completely wrong about. I couldn't help but look at the plot through White Wolf's eyes. Chen Qili came to the States, crashed at his place, and it ruined his life. White Wolf went to a U.S. federal prison for a decade because of the FBI operation prompted by the Liu murder. Objectively speaking, killing Henry Liu was a catastrophe. But both White Wolf and Liu Maochuan warmly welcomed me to our meetings in Taipei. They were happy to be interviewed, and they gave me plenty of time. We took selfies. It was all perfectly relaxed. So why on earth would White Wolf talk to me about a political assassination that even the assassins admitted they'd been duped into carrying out, an assassination that led to prison sentences for everyone involved? And that's when I realized. To White Wolf, and separately to Liu Maochuan with his memoir, the Henry Liu murder actually represents the good old days. It kept making me think of West Side Story.
Yeah.
Like they had this very stylized version of gangs, and it was more like, you know, boys will be boys, and we would get into street brawls, and maybe there was a little bit of petty crime, but it was all, I mean, it's very romanticized when you hear these people speak now. I'm talking with Brian Hu. He's a Taiwanese-American journalist and a progressive activist based in Taipei. He's one of the founders of an independent online news site called New Bloom.
So there's that romanticized image of gangs, and when you look at some of the movies, for example, contemporary Taiwanese gang movies, like Atao or Manga is another good one actually, they have a very stylized image of that. Gangs as similar to like Yakuza films, defending the peace, banding together, brotherhood, male kind of bonding in that sense. And that's their own understanding of each other, of themselves. And they often refer to themselves as the jianghu, which is a Chinese term regarding the kind of secret underworld of martial artists. And you see this in a lot of the wuxia films, that there's kind of people that they're all part of the secret clans of martial artists. And that's how they often conceptualize themselves. So actually, it's quite interesting that way.
I also ran that by a wuxia expert, Raymond Sang. He's a lecturer at the University of Southern California in San Diego. Wuxia films, he told me, are based on folklore about outlaws.
In this genre, so that's why many film adaptations also about assassins, about this kind of ancient heroes that they hold their loyalty to their friends, to their brothers, blood brothers, something like that.
So that's why they're talking to me. The Bamboo Union's version of the Henry Liu assassination is a kind of hero's journey, made popular in Chinese film. A band of brothers survive overwhelming hardship after a betrayal by the powers that be, and they remain loyal to each other throughout. The Henry Liu case made them internationally famous. Through the lens of wuxia films, they're heroes, so they're proud of it. So this has been an interesting trip down a historical lane. As I said, it was new turf to me. But the entire point of this trip to Taiwan is to see if I can use the Henry Liu case to establish some facts that could be significant in the murder of Haing Ngor, my 28-year-old cold case. In 1991, just 6 years into his life sentence, Chen Qi-li received clemency. He was released from prison, and so was Wu Dun. Within 5 years, Chen Qi-li moved to Cambodia. I want to wrap up. I just want to show these photos. White Wolf visited Chen Qi-li in Phnom Penh at one point. He insisted, somewhat unconvincingly to me, that Chen Qi-li was just an honest businessman.
Yep.
I'm just wondering in Cambodia if he ever met this gentleman. I pulled out my iPad and I showed White Wolf photos of our suspect Larry and a few other people.
是否有看过？
Yeah, this older gentleman.
都不认识。
Nope.
Nope, it's the same. But he didn't recognize anyone.
都不认识。
Nope.
哦，他们有来往，可能他这边很多。
When he was in Cambodia, he only visited Chen Qi-li's places.
Right.
So that's it. So he doesn't know anyone else.
去我们陈记家里面。
It's around this same time, in May 1992, that Taiwanese voters removed the KMT from power in their first democratic elections. The White Terror was over. White Wolf was back in Taiwan after serving time in the States, and Taiwan's new democratic government didn't want to be cozy with a triad anymore. In fact, they started cracking down on organized crime. By 1996, it was too hot. White Wolf left. He'd spend the next 17 years in China. Meanwhile, Chen Qi-li was establishing himself in Cambodia. And that's where the Bamboo Union hit it big.
I mean, I know that they've been involved in human trafficking, money laundering, arms smuggling, you name it, the full range of criminal activities.
That's coming up in my next episode of Who Killed Haing Ngor? My name is Patricia Nunan. If you knew Haing Ngor personally and would like to contribute, or if you have information or ideas that may be helpful to the investigation, please get in touch. I can be found at whokilledhaingnor@gmail.com. I'm on Telegram as MP Nunan. If you'd like to support the investigation, there's a donation button on the webpage, whokilledhaingnor.com. Thank you for listening.